There was a boy, a very strange, enchanted boy. They say he wandered very far, over land and sea. A little shy and sad of eye, but very wise was he. And then one day, one magic day, he passed my way. And as we spoke of many things, fools and kings, this he said to me: the greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. Once upon a time. Once upon a time, there was a boy. Poor. With a gentle heart. Kind eyes. And a philosopher's soul. Because his parents didn't have a lot of money, they sent him to the castle, where he began his work in the stables, mucking the stalls, brushing and combing out the horses' manes and tails, cleaning their hooves, and polishing the saddles. This one was a bit of a dreamer, and he had a way with the horses. But he had something gentle almost graceful about him. And so when he reached puberty, he was brought inside the castle to work in the household of the king. He was pleasing to look at and mild-mannered. had that gentle heart and the kind eyes. And as the years passed, he learned. He learned to read and he learned to write. He learned the manners and ways of being at court. Until when he was in his 20s, he was running the king's household, taking care of his papers and his calendar, like a secretary to the king. Now the king had no eyes to see the gentle heart of this young man. He had no eyes to see the philosopher's soul. The young man was merely, like all of the people who served him and worked and lived in his household, a commodity, a useful thing, like a tool. Something you appreciate but don't necessarily pay too much attention to. Unless they do something stupid and then you fire them. Or kill them, depending on what the stupidness was. And one day, it came to the king's attention that the queen had lost her golden ring. Now, you have to know something about the queen. Her passion, her secret passion, was to swim in wild water. Every day, she would sneak out of the castle with only one lady in attending. Once a day in the gray dawn, or in the gloaming time of the afternoon, the time when the light was not so bright but the dark was not so deep, she would go and swim in the wild waters. And no one knew except for the one who would accompany her. Now, the last time the queen went swimming, she'd forgotten to take off her ring. And indeed, the last time she saw her ring was when she went swimming. She tried in vain to hold her hands in such a way that her husband wouldn't notice that her ring was missing. And when she found him looking at her hands, she'd make up some kind of excuse. Oh, I just put on cream, I had to take off my rings. Or, oh, I was just in the bath, I forgot to put it back on. Or, oh, I must have set it down somewhere on my commode. But after a few days, the king wasn't having it and told her to go and get her ring, and she had to confess that her golden ring was lost, but she could not confess that she went swimming. And so she said, somebody must have stolen it. Now the king thought, the only person who comes into our private chambers and would have the possibility to steal something like that when they are alone, because none of the dressers and people who clean and take care of things, they're never alone in our rooms. But the person who can come and go and is often here alone is my secretary. The king, as soon as he had this thought, was convinced that his secretary had taken the ring of the queen. And he called him to him and said, "If you do not produce the ring within 24 hours tomorrow morning at breakfast, your life is forfeit." Had not seen the ring, did not know where the ring was, and had no hope of finding the ring. And so he knew that he had to make his peace. He set his affairs in order, paid off his tab at the pub. He had no family left, but said goodbye to his few friends in the castle, and went out for a wander in the late afternoon golden sunlight of the forest, the place he loved most. Now it was a beech forest, and the light came through in a very particular gold-green way, and the trees were spaced apart, and he could walk on last year's crunching. Made his way to the edge on the other side of this little forest to where the oak tree, the great oak tree, grew, reaching its long, thick arms into the meadow. And he went to the oak tree, as he often did, and laid on the ground with his back against the tree, and he spoke to the tree, as he often did. He spoke about the fact that he was going to die tomorrow. He spoke about the fact that he didn't want to die, that he wanted to live. And he began to speak of all of the things he loved, praising them and saying goodbye to them. All of the beings that he loved, all the places that he loved. And he wept as he sat there with his back against the tree. He wept for all the things he had not yet experienced in his life. He wept for never having known love. He wept for never having grown old enough to have his own children. When he felt that he had cried enough and spoken enough, and had sat in the silence that happens after truth-telling and deep feeling, out of that edge place where meadow and forest meet, out of the grass of that edge place came a white snake. Huge creature, 2 meters long and as thick as his thigh, with golden eyes. And the young man and the snake looked into each other's eyes. And the snake knew he had nothing to fear from the young man. That this one with the philosopher's soul and the gentle heart and the kind eyes was not one who would beat him or try to kill him, as others had done. And the young man looked into the snake's eyes and knew he had nothing to fear from the snake, that he would not try to eat him. And a kind of understanding passed between them, a kind of peace, a kind of kinship. And they were there together in the eternity of a moment of silence, a breath, and another, and another, until the snake moved on, sliding back into the grass. The young man kept sitting there watching him go until the tail of the snake disappeared. And as he looked around, this so familiar, beloved place had suddenly changed. It was as if all beings in this place suddenly had eyes and were watching him. And as the sun began to set and the blackbird landed on the tallest tree and began to sing his evening song, full of longing and love and pride for his family, the young man realized he could understand what the blackbird was singing. Startled, he stood up and looked around. Confused, not knowing what had happened. The illusion broken, back in the world that he knew, he began to walk, not run, but walk quite quickly, back in the direction of the castle. Until all at once, he could hear the words of the chattering of the squirrels. And a butterfly flew by and greeted him. And as he arrived back at the castle, he could hear the sparrows gossiping. And they were started to tell the story of a duck in the lake who had indigestion because he'd swallowed a golden ring. Aha, thought the young man, a duck with indigestion who had swallowed a golden ring. And so the next morning before dawn, he went over to the lake, to the duck, when they were still sleeping with their beak underneath their wing there. sparrows that he had heard the sparrows say was the nest of this particular duck. And he was breathing this duck with a kind of a wheezy sort of sound. And he walked so quietly over to the duck and took his hands on either side of this feathery, soft body. And he grabbed the duck, and he shook the duck upside down until the duck opened its bill, its beak, and the golden ring came falling out. "Thank you, thank you, thank you," he said, grabbed the ring, and went running back to the castle. It was almost breakfast, and this was his chance to save his life. He walked into the breakfast room, put the ring on the table, looked at the king, and waited. The king, taking the ring in his hands, turned to the queen and said, "Is this your golden ring?" "Yes," she said. And she looked at the young man with terror in her eyes because he could tell her secret. And so she said, "What position in this house would you like to have? You get to have a raise." And the young man thought about it, and he thought, this is really not the best place to be working. If every single time something goes missing, I might get killed. And so he said, "I would like to have a horse and some money and the freedom to go search my fortune elsewhere." And so by high noon that day, he was sitting on a horse with his few things packed together. He'd already said goodbye to everybody when he thought he was dying, and so he just left on the horse with a bit of food. He disappeared into the forest, and for the first time in his life, he was free. No one told him where to go or what to do. No one told him when to stop, what to eat, how to be. He was terrified and exhilarated and had no idea what to do with himself. And so he sat in the saddle with his horse, and the days went by, and he wandered. And at night he would climb a tree and sleep up in the branches, and on the days he'd be on his horse's back. And together they found fresh water to drink and food to eat. And there were warm days, and there were soft days. Listen to the news of the songbirds and what was happening on the ground from the beetles, to stories of the hunt from the hawks, and of nuts and nests and roots from the rodents. And this went on for days, until he found his own rhythm, until his inner voice could join the wild voices, until he could follow his own desire of where to go. And he began to sing, and he began to speak that poet's soul of his, that philosopher's soul of his, weaving poetry and song through the forest. And one day, One day as he was riding along, he heard a thrashing and a calling for help. A thrashing and a helpless, hopeless, shrieking, strangled, kind of choking sound. And he followed it over to the edge of the river, and there in the reeds were 3 juvenile salmon, silver, thrashing, stuck in the reeds, thrashing so hard that flakes of their scales were flipping off into the air. And they were only half in the water and half in the air, and they couldn't breathe. And he got off his horse and he picked up each fish and threw it as hard as he could out into the current of the river. And when all 3 had been brought safely, or thrown safely to the deep currents, they looked up out of the water and said, "Do not forget us. We will not forget you. Someday we will return. We remember the ocean, and we remember the sweet waters of our mother, of our birth. We will not forget you, and someday we will repay you as you have helped us. Don't forget us." And they swam off. The next day, as he was on his horse going along the track, not really paying attention to where the horse's feet were or even the track that he was on, he suddenly heard a great clamoring. Hundreds, thousands of voices calling, "Stop! Stop! Ah! Stop!" He looked down, and his horse had walked right into the middle of an anthill. Thousands of voices, thousands of ants calling for his attention to stop trampling their people. He got the horse off of the track as quickly as possible, tethered him to a bush, and spent the rest of the day carving a new track around the anthill so that anybody who might come afterwards would not step on them. The queen emerged out of the anthill and said to him, "Thank you. I will not forget you. Do not forget us. We have complex capacity to respond, and we can carry so much. Do not underestimate us, and do not forget us. We will help you one day when you are in need." The young man got back on his steed and carried on. The next day, as he was going along the track, which was rising in altitude, and he was up where there were craggy hills and cliffs showing and pines, he suddenly in the air saw 3 juvenile ravens coming hurtling and crashing down to earth. They cried, "Help! Help! Help!" Smashing, each of their bodies smashing into the earth, he went running over with his horse, dismounted, and asked them, "What happened? What's going on? We fell out of our nest and we can't fly." And they told him about their plight, how they were destined to die if they didn't have food. They couldn't fly, they couldn't hunt, and they couldn't care for themselves. And the young man's heart broke. The gentle heart of him broke. And so he did an unbelievable thing. He made a sacrifice of his horse, taking out his knife and offering him as food, not only to these 3 ravens, but to all of Raven's people. And after they had eaten their fill, they turned and said to the young man, "We will not forget you. Do not forget us. We can fly far. We can fly between worlds to all places in all worlds. And when you have need of us, we will come. The young man continued on foot, having lost his best friend. He had no money left. Nothing of his old life remained, and he walked without knowing it across a threshold into another kingdom. And upon arriving there in the city, it was stinky, and it was loud, and it was noisy. He was not used to living in a city anymore, after the months he'd spent out in the forests. But he didn't know what to do with himself. He didn't have any money or food. And so he made his way to the castle, because he could read, he could write, he knew how to run a household of a king, and he knew how to take care of horses. He had a gentle heart and kind eyes and a philosopher's soul. And so he put himself for service in the king's company. He knocked on the door and walked in to introduce himself to the king and the queen and their daughter as their new secretary. He bowed low before the king, and he bowed low before the queen. And then he looked at the princess. Oh, friends. He was in trouble. Never had he seen such an exquisite beauty as the princess. Never had his heart been pierced by the eyes of another. Never would he do anything just to be close to the beloved. As the days went on, he did everything he could think of to get time with the princess, which wasn't that much because she didn't really have anything to do with her father's secretary. One day in the kitchen, the young man overheard two of the other servants talking that the king and his wife wanted to get their daughter married. It was high time that she be married. And so they had put out a call to all eligible suitors in the land. Now, the princess had a different opinion. She didn't really want to be married. And so every time a suitor would come, she would set them impossible tasks. Tasks they were destined to fail, for which she would kill them. Well, not her personally, but she would have them killed. Oh, when the young man heard this, when the young man heard that he might possibly, maybe, somehow, have the princess for his wife, in a drunken, delirious haze, completely out of his mind. The next day, when he saw the king, he said to him, "Please, your majesty, please, I would like to give myself as a suitor for your daughter's hand in marriage." I don't really have to tell you how the king responded. He thought it was absurd. He thought it was a joke, and he started to laugh. And laugh. And laugh. Until he saw the young man still standing there with love-sick puppy eyes. And so the king said, "Well, if she'll have you. It's been months now, and we've gone through about 20 different suitors, so really, I don't have any hope left. So if she'll take you, well, then go for it." And he called the princess into the room. And the same thing happened. The king told her that this servant wanted to ask for her hand in marriage, and she too laughed and laughed and laughed until she too saw his lovesick puppy eyes. And then she thought, well, it might be fun to think up some new things that I could ask him to do. And so she said, okay. I don't understand why he wanted to marry her, but he did. Love makes us stupid and blind. And so when she said to him, "Come with me," he went, following, love-struck and blind. They went to the ocean together. And she took off her gold ring and threw it as far as she could out into the ocean. And she said to him, "Bring it back to me or drown trying." And she turned on her heel and went back to the castle. He stood there on the coast, feeling the water lapping at his feet, his naked feet, kissing how the water of the ocean was kissing his feet and kissing the sand. He began to speak. He began to speak of his love for the princess, about her beauty. He didn't have any friends or anyone to talk to, but he talked and talked to the ocean and the seagulls and the sand and the stones and the shells and the seaweed. He talked and he talked and he talked about what it was like to love and how he'd never loved before and how he longed for one kiss of her lips like the ocean was kissing the sand, kissing his toes. And when he ran out of words to say, and the sun was setting into the ocean, the belly of the ocean, pouring blood red onto the water, 3 red salmon came up, cresting on the wave. And they brought him an oyster. on the next wave they retreated. And the young man recognized those three he had helped, who now had metamorphosed and could live in the ocean. I opened the oyster, and inside was the golden ring of the princess. And like a lovesick puppy in the last light of the day, he went running as fast as his legs could carry him, running. Surely she would accept him now, running back to the castle, running all the way up the stairs, knocking on the door, bursting in and laying the ring at her feet. And she looked at him. And she did not have eyes to see his gentle heart. And she did not have eyes to see his kind, lovesick eyes with anything but disdain. And she did not have the eyes to see his poetic heart. And so she said no. One task is not enough. I have another task for you tomorrow. And so the young man spent a sleepless and feverish night of longing and despair. And the next morning, she brought him and 10 bags of golden millet to the orchard. And she had her servants pour the millet all over the floor, all over the ground in the orchard. And she had the horses come through and stomp the millet into the ground, into the mud. And then she said to him, "You must collect every single grain of the golden millet, otherwise your life is forfeit." She turned on her heel and walked away. And the young man sat there in the orchard, surrounded by 10 open bags, strewn bags of millet. And the sun grew higher in the sky. And he began to speak. He spoke praise and poetry of the sun, of his life, and of this life, and of the beauty and sweetness of fruits, and how he would never know the fruits of love, and how he would never know his own children's arms wrapped around him, how he would never have the sweetness of a life, because there's no way he could gather every golden corn of millet. Hours he spoke praise and poetry. From his despair and his longing and his love. He spoke that he didn't want to die. What he wanted to live for. And when he was done, and the golden sun of the afternoon was slanting through the orchard, he could hear suddenly, like the sound of wind through grass, 1,000 tiny feet arriving. And he could hear the queen of the ants calling, and the warriors chanting. And he began to laugh as thousands of ants arrived, each one picking up a golden corn of millet. And he held the bag open, and they marched in and out of the bag, bringing the millet, kernel by kernel, grain by grain, back into the sacks. They worked all night. All night they worked. And in the morning with the sunrise, the last kernels, the last grains of millet were put into the sacks, all 10 of them full again. And again he ran like a lovesick puppy back to the castle, up the stairs, back to his princess who he loved. He said, "I've done it. All 10 sacks are full. Now may I have your hand in marriage?" And she didn't have the eyes to see, and she said, "No. No. 2 tasks are not enough. There is a 3rd task that awaits you." "Bring me," she said. "Bring me an apple from the tree of life. Bring me a golden apple from the tree of life." "And if you do not bring this to me by tomorrow morning, your life is forfeit." The young man had no idea where to go. It was hard enough to find a golden ring in the ocean. It was hard enough to collect millet grains, none of which he'd done by himself, but at least they were in this world. They were things he could touch, things that creatures could move and shape and make and bring. But the tree of life? Surely that didn't even exist. She wanted him to bring something out of some myth, some magical world, something that was not graspable. It was not possible, even if the ravens would come and help, even if the ants would come and help, even if the fish would come and help, even if every creature in the forest would come and help. The tree of life did not exist. And so he took his leave. He said goodbye to the people in the castle that he'd been working with. He resigned himself now to dying. And he went out into the forest that he loved so much. He wandered out into the forest. And this third night, this time, he was prepared to die. And he made himself a place, again under the oak tree, a different oak tree, but an oak tree. He made himself a place, and he spoke to the snake, and he spoke to the salmon, and he spoke to the ants, and he spoke to death, and he spoke to the ocean, and to the sun, and the moon, and the stars, and he spoke to his dead mother and his dead father, and all of his ancestors, all of those who'd come before, that he was the last in line of, and he told them all he was dying. Tomorrow morning, he would be put to death. And the whole night he sat vigil. He hadn't eaten in days. He'd been so obsessed with the princess and so busy with the tasks she had given him, he hadn't eaten in days. And he sat there, preparing to die. As the first light broke, he gave his thanks for this place that held him through the night, this place where he could speak to his family and that felt like the only family he had. And as the first rays of the sun crested above the horizon, he heard a laughing of ravens, and he looked up above the meadow and he could see them tumbling and playing and swooping and diving in the sky like acrobats. And they called out to him, "We told you we can fly far!" And a single apple fell out of the sky and into his waiting hand, a golden apple from the tree of life. The young man stood there, speechless and stunned. In the moment that the apple touched him, he was utterly changed. He didn't know what happened, but something so fundamental shifted in him. That he was not the same person anymore. And he carried this precious apple, this golden apple from that world, from the tree of life, back to the castle. He carried it as if in a trance. Pulled by his love for the princess, inexorably drawn to her. And also knowing what he must do. And so he walked back to the castle. The only thing he had with him, his knife, the knife he'd used to sacrifice his horse, the knife he had used to feed himself, the knife his father had given him. And he carried this golden apple up, up, up to the princess. And when he walked in the door, she did not recognize him. So utterly different did he look. And he walked over to her, and he looked in her eyes, and without saying a word, he cut the apple in two and offered her half. Then she knew who it was, but she was speechless with disbelief. She thought it must surely be an apple from the garden, except the apples are not ripe yet. And she took a bite, and and he took a bite. And it was delicious and sweet like honey. And as she gazed at him, she too was changed. Suddenly, she had the eyes to see his good heart. She had the eyes to see the kind eyes filled with love, no longer puppy love. And she had the eyes to see and feel his poet's soul. And she said to him, "Will you marry me?" And he said yes. And they did get married. And they did have children. And the young man became an older man. And he taught his children the stories of the salmon and the stories of the ant people and the stories of the raven people and the stories of the horse people and of the ocean and of the sun and the moon, and how to follow the trail of the golden rings and the golden apples, and how to understand the language